Aloha. Happy
Hello.
happy Monday.
Hey, happy Monday.
We're here with Alyx Luck. And I noticed you have an extra name here, which I didn't realize.
New.
Yeah, it shows Ulbrich.
Yeah, that's an X name. So
Oh, okay. Oops, sorry about that.
no worries.
But we're here to do a little recording, a little entertainment, hopefully for people who are perhaps not out running today. Maybe they are running, and we'll have an audio version. And again, this will come under hawaiiultra.com. You can find us there. But Alyx, can you tell me a little bit about, I don't know much about your background and stuff. I've been
Okay.
fortunate enough to see you in person and be there and stuff with you in your present life and stuff. But tell me something about yourself. Tell me about where you grew up.
So I was born in Virginia and lived in New Mexico, I would say, for the majority of my middle school, high school years. So I guess that's where I'd say I'm from. And I started with a background in dance and gymnastics, so very privileged, spoiled upbringing. And then I moved into track in high school, so I switched schools in high school to work with the best track coach in the state. And I was very fortunate to be talented to some extent that I was able to have some success there and a little bit of success in college until I decided that playing rugby and drinking beer was more up my alley than running track. So
Wait, what college did you go to?
I went to New Mexico State. So I had started to run track, and like I said, the party scene seemed a lot more exciting than running in circles. So
I've had some experience with rugby. I spent 25 years in Aspen, so we used to have a big rugby tournament there.
yeah, we just had a club. We had a club team. It wasn't officially sponsored by our college, but we got to compete, and yeah. So
What kind of dance did you do? What kind of dance were you in?
mostly ballet, but a little bit of everything, from hip hop, tap, jazz. A little, yeah. That was my big and probably first big passion. So, but I saw a lot of people that I was friends with dying of eating disorders at a very young age, and I kind of saw the darker side of the sport. And I think at 14, I told my mom I didn't want to go down that road. It wasn't a healthy environment, and I went from 6 hours of dance a day to quitting. So
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had some experience with friends who were, I knew a ballet teacher and stuff when I was in college and stuff. And I saw that. But that's great at 14 that you recognize that. That's amazing.
yeah, it was kind of funny. And then I chose running and bodybuilding, so two more sports with also probably not the best body images for some of those people.
Yeah, I really, it bugs me, since we're kind of all online and stuff, friends, I consider them friends on Facebook, the continual use of makeup just being
Clearly,
so,
I don't.
yeah, it's like I'm just amazed by it. I think I understand it. I mean, I know it's the social pressure and stuff, but I admire people that just, hey, here's who I am. This is what you got.
Yeah, I would say that's. I don't know if that's a good segue into what you want, but that's definitely a part of the reason I moved away from the bodybuilding. Although I do still coach it for a lot of people. It was an amazing and extremely hard sport, much harder than running 100-mile races. But a lot of what you do and how well you do it is based off of a perception of what you look like and having a certain image. And as a coach, and even in my own personal life, I felt like the need to look a certain way shouldn't be a main focal point to a sport for me. It just wasn't the right match.
And you mentioned that it was harder than running 100-mile races.
Way
In
more.
what aspect? Was it the training, or was it the nutrition?
Have you ever tried being hungry for 4 months?
Um, Sort of, kind of. Back in college, I used to do month fasts.
Okay.
Where I would just go without just water for a month and stuff. And it was more a spiritual thing than trying to look a certain way.
Yeah, so it's definitely the nutrition part is hard. Training and bodybuilding is hard. I chose to not use drugs, and you said you don't usually get political on here, so
Oh
I
no,
won't
that's okay. That's
I won't
okay.
go down that. I won't go down that. But I have a lot of friends. I'd say 99% of my friends in that realm use drugs, and I think there's a lot of education and benefits that can be learned from that as far as like medical science and what the human body is capable of with these enhancements. But as someone who wasn't using them, I got kind of to a point that I had reached the upper level of what was feasible with my genetics and my dedication. And so to continue to bash your head against the wall per se, or to try to improve on what I had been doing, in a realm where 99% of the people weren't on the same playing field, it was just kind of it was a diminishing returns, if you will.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I'm guessing it was steroids and EPO
Yeah.
and that usual stuff.
So not so much with the EPO, because bodybuilders, they don't care if they can walk up a flight of stairs. They're not trying to, and a lot of people will really mock that. They'll say, what's the point of having all that muscle if it's not functional, or what's the point of looking that way if you're not strong? But for anyone that's really passionate about the sport and is doing it right, those people are strong. It's just they're not choosing to whip the weight around like a power lifter or CrossFitter might. So they might lift lighter weights but do much more targeted lifts. But so yeah, not so much EPO, but yes, a lot of steroids, a lot of abuse of thyroid and ADHD medications, a lot of abuse of really anything that could affect your metabolism. But at that side effect, when you stop using those things, your body, it has a very hard recovery period from what I've seen with a lot of my friends. And so then you become essentially dependent. So if you just Google like how many bodybuilders have thyroid issues or diabetes, and it's going to be 80-90% of the people coming out of that sport might have affected themselves, and a huge chunk, maybe 20 or 30%, end up with like diabetes for the rest of their life, or a
Wow.
thyroid disorder, or a major metabolic disorder. So
Well, would it be inaccurate, or would it be somewhat accurate to say that they even though they were building muscle up, they weren't really taking care of their core?
um I mean, that's the thing, we don't know. So bodybuilders have always been ahead of medical science, so they're testing substances that aren't regulated by any service. So if what they're getting is what they think what they're getting, or if they're intelligent enough that they're making these things, they have their own labs, which a lot of them do.
Yeah.
They might be doing things that are very healthy and just fine. The reason that we use human growth hormone in children and in surgery repairs and in all sorts of that is because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So people want to, and in some ways, utilizing human growth hormone is something that some people just need a little bit of to maybe fix a knee surgery. So I don't think necessarily, from my educational background as well as my being around it, I don't think necessarily it's bad for everyone and they're all destroying themselves. But I would say to use steroids properly, if that's the sort of thing,
Well, I
would
can
be
remember when HGH.
very hard.
I remember when HGH first came out.
Yeah.
And the not actual. Well, I remember when HGH research came out, but then there was the what do you call it? The precursors, or natural ingredients that you can use to help build that up.
Right.
What speaking of you talked about your background and degrees. Did you end up graduating college? Are you a doctor?
Yeah, so I actually finished. So I went to school for nutrition and got sidetracked and did a massage school program, and then I went back to school. I was originally actually looking at a program that was a master's program for the psychology of essentially the relationship of food and then athletes, and both the psychology of their relationships with that food and how it affects them, coming with my nutrition background. But I found a program in India that
Oh,
was more affordable. So I ended up going to school to get my doctorates, cheaper than I could get my master's in the States, for natural medicine. And I just did a big focus on psychology and a big focus on, more nutrition education and kind of a lot of herbal healing, because they kind of allowed you to alter your program to focus on the core things that you wanted to target and practice. So
whereabouts in India?
in Calcutta, so it was mostly a distance learning program, although I spent a lot of money and a lot of time at the University of Hawaii doing proctored tests and things like that. So
Okay, so that is that part of the reason you initially came to Hawaii? Or
no, I
how
was
did you get
married.
to the islands?
Yeah, I was married in my 20s to a military guy, and so when he got stationed in Hawaii, I got to come along. And when I was in my 30s and single, I returned to the best place I could think of. So yeah, so it's kind of
Weren't
a
you headed, if I remember correctly, weren't you headed to Japan or China
yeah.
before?
So I spent a few years with him in Japan, and I really love it there. Outside of here, that's probably one of my high pick places of places I'd live again, that I've gotten to live. So yeah.
And when you first moved here, you were in Oahu, yeah, in Honolulu,
Yeah,
essentially.
Oahu, and I've kind of got a big friend base there. I'm a little bit newer to Big Island, but still, I think it's more diverse, and so I really appreciate that.
And I don't know specifically, but you were a high level bodybuilder.
Yeah, so I got my pro card, which is a pretty hard thing to do, and then I competed on a world the world competitions for that a few times. I think I got like 14th one year and 11th one year, and that was kind of when I started evaluating things like, well, what's it going to take for me to be top 5? And that would have been steroids. And what's it going to take for me to be top 10? And that's going to be having my body fat so low and changing how I live my life, meaning giving up running and hiking and things like that, to a point that it wasn't the sport for me anymore. So
Okay, so yeah, how did you do you remember that moment when you were maybe out running where it was like, hey, I want to do this?
So I made a bet with myself. You'll probably appreciate the humor and stupidity in this. I had heard about ultra running at a very young age. So I think I was 7,
Oh, wow.
6 years old when I met a guy named Garrett Ford. And he had done Western States, both on horseback and as the Tevis Cup horseback,
Yeah.
and on foot. And so he was probably, this is going to be horribly embarrassing, and I'm still going to send it to him because we're still friends. He was dating his now wife of many, many years, Lisa, and he was probably my first crush, per se. He was a family friend. He was probably early 30s, late 20s. We saw him at all of these horse racing events, and I was like, wow, like that's the kind of guy I'd want to marry. He's into horses and he runs and he's super fit, and he was really nice to me. He didn't treat me like a 7-year-old kid. And so I probably had my first crush on him, and I thought, oh man, he just runs 50 or 100 miles. That's so cool. And so I started running a lot. As my parents, we lived in a very rural area, and my mom would let me get out of the car and she'd drive behind me for 5 miles, and as I ran on a dirt road, or she would I'd say I'm going to go run. And I think, back in the day, they bought me like a CD player you could carry.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I would run with my big CD player and listen to like Linkin Park on repeat for hours as it skipped every time I hit a bump. And so I started running, I think when I was 8 or 9, there was a race that I had done, and it was these long distance horse races I was doing with my mom, and my horse had an issue, and so I just got off and ran for almost 30 miles. And so I didn't really think anything of it, and I didn't think anything of it being weird. I just, every time the horse was going that slower that I could run, I would just get off and run. And at that time, my 50 pounds or whatever I weighed probably didn't help the horse very much. But
you were what, 7 years old, 8 years old then?
Something like that. And so it was very natural. And then I went to high school really young. That whole privileged upbringing, I had done well in school, at least on, books. And so I went to high school at 13. And so I was lucky enough to be like the youngest kid to ever compete at state track meets. And,
oh, wow.
At that age, I think there's a lot of times middle schoolers will run as competitively or better than high schoolers. So I was kind of at an age where it's really socially awkward. I was not involving myself and getting along with, high school kids probably as well as I should have, because I was a lot younger and super awkward. And so I just focused everything on running. And it just kind of, it's been a lifelong thing since then. So.
No, I have one sort of Western States story. I helped out at the Way Too Cool 50 back in 2009. And Gary Wang's a friend of mine, and Gary was doing the race, and I was actually in San Francisco, and staying at Gary's house, getting some medical stuff done. And I helped at an aid station, and this old guy comes up and starts talking to me about stuff, and really nice guy, super nice guy. And as it turns out, it was Gordy Ainsley, which was like, they had no idea that was Gordy and stuff. And, years later now, I am in the same age group as Gordy. Gordy is actually younger. He's 1 year younger than me and stuff. So, but yeah, I still kind of remember that. That was, 11 years ago and stuff.
That's so funny.
Is that maybe, a running goal that you might have in the future? Well, I mean, everybody, I'd love to do Western States.
So I'm kind of weird about that. I've qualified a lot of times as far as like to be able to put in for the lottery, but I don't think I would do the race unless I like outright won a qualifier and got a golden ticket. Just kind of a matter of stubbornness and pride. I don't know. So I haven't put in for it. I'll probably go run the course. I've talked about it with Billy, my current partner, and we're probably going to go run the course at some point, just because I want to see it, but it wouldn't be like an official race. It would just be, to go do the course.
Well, I was actually the buff that I was wearing and joking when I started out was actually part of the Western States course.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, it was the Jed Smith Ultra.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, nice course. I mean, that part of the course is really, really nice. Everything I saw when I was volunteering at the Way Too Cool, because that's part of the course too, is just, wow, these are areas that I want to run.
Right. So that's, if nothing else, I'll probably run the course at some point. But as far as doing the race, I'm a small race kind of person. I'm not as excited about being there with a bunch of photographers and a ton of crowds, and it's kind of it's a cool in theory, but as far as all of that, it seems kind of like a lot of hype.
Yeah. So you got into ultra running. What are some of the races that you remember that you really liked? I mean, it's hard to dislike a race. Well, tell me, is there a race you disliked?
Ooh, is there a race I disliked? So I've done a lot of loop, not a lot. My experience isn't all that exciting. I've done a handful of loop races, and they are not my preference. Actually, my last race I did was one, but it was because my partner had not done one, and it was kind of on his list of things to do. But as far as that format, I mean, I'm a race director now, so like I'm putting a race on that's in that format. So I appreciate it. But as far as for me, that's not my main favorite style of race, I guess. So there's a lot of races for those of, I don't know if your viewers, if there's anybody who doesn't super follow ultra running, but there's kind of a format that there's two ways to do these loop races, and it's like as many loops as you can of a 1 mile loop or half-mile loop or 2 mile loop in a certain time period, which is great for people that are maybe kind of dipping their toe in the water with their first ultra and they don't know how far they want to go, or they really like the pressure of time. And then there's also like 100 miles of a 1 mile loop, things like that. And well, I appreciate what those bring to the table of logistics, easy access to aid stations, not having to carry things. They're not my favorite style of races to do personally, but my parents live in Florida, and so that's a lot of the races are there. They're kind of at smaller parks and things like that. So I've done quite a few of those races. They're not always my favorite, but then, you know, you get to focus on the community of people, and you get to, hey, I'm going to cheer that one, you know, guy with the polka dot socks on every time I see him because he looks like he's having a hard day. And, you know, you can kind of focus on different aspects of the running.
Well, you're friends with Sean Blanton, aren't you? The run bum.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We chat sometimes, and Billy's one of his pretty good friends, I think. So
yeah, I saw Sean, and shout out to you, Mr. Blanton, Mr. Run Bum, for doing actually that whole Florida trail that he
yeah,
did.
that was cool. Looked swampy and miserable, and I'm glad it was him, not me.
Well, and I know Sean, back in the day, here we used to have the run to the sun over
Yes,
up to Haleakala, and he tried to bring it back. Is it
it's
last year
really hard
or
with
last? Yeah, and
yeah.
then Hurt has tried to do it, but they didn't get the permits last year.
Yeah, I've talked to the park myself about it. There is apparently, and I'm not going to name names because I don't know if they want announcements, but there is apparently that run is supposedly going to be resurrected next year, which would be really cool. So I know of a race director and promoter who's working on that, and I don't know if they want to be named, but hopefully it comes back. It would be really cool. I've run some sections of it pretty recently. We went over and had a running weekend there, and it'd be a cool race. I've looked into it. I've talked to the park. They're not super helpful. So to the race director who does pull it off, hats off.
You've done Hurt, haven't you? The Hurt 100?
I have. I've done Hurt a couple times. I'd say pretty immersed with that community because that's really the community that I started doing a lot more trail running and kind of identifying, you know, I would do like an ultra run a year, you know, in my 20s, but it was while I was bodybuilding. So I wouldn't really run. It would just kind of depend on fitness and show up and do a run. And
That would be that's incredible that you could do that while you're doing the bodybuilding and basically starving yourself.
I don't
Holy
know.
smokes.
I mean, yeah, but I did a lot of stair mill and things like that. And when you're physically fit, you can get through, I think, a 50K. Even if you're not a runner, you just involve a lot of hiking and, you know, so I do things like that. But I'd say when I was in Hawaii, when I first moved to Hawaii, that was kind of my first attempt at connecting with the ultra running community. So I'd say a lot of the Hurt community people are really close to my heart. And that was really cool to see too. I'll say when Billy and I started the progress of putting on races, they were extremely supportive. And, you know, technically one race in Hawaii, another race in Hawaii, and I wasn't sure what their reaction would be. And, you know, John gave me their blessing, and they were very happy for us. So that was cool to see that kind of community.
I personally, for me, I think that's great that we have more. I mean, technically, the only race we've had, or the only ultra we've had here, has been the Hilo to Volcano, which is on a road. You know, it's not really a trail run or anything.
Right, and that's still really cool. I think, you know, different kinds of ultras are great for different kinds of people. As far as like our race direction, we really want to focus on getting people on the trails of Big Island and seeing kind of the more iconic things of Big Island that maybe when people come to Big Island, they don't see on their drive around the island. So we are going to have, you know, that road option, but we're doing that in a homage to the ultra run that used to host that. It's not necessarily going to be our bread and butter kind of race, but we do want to offer it.
In fact, one of my buddies, Carl Wordle, who he's done Run to the Sun, he's done a lot of ultras. I guess technically he was the last winner of that race when it went Hilo to Waimea, because he was the only one who finished.
Yeah, it's a tough route. So for those of your people who don't know, this year in June, hopefully, we are having runners run from Hilo to Waimea. And it's a big climb. So you're going from sea level to just under 7,000 feet and then back down to sea level. And it's pavement and it's got a big shoulder, which is really nice because as someone who has run on this island and done a 100-miler that did not have a shoulder, that was really miserable. But
where did you, I kind of remember that. Where did you guys go? What loops were you doing?
So I ran a race put on by a guy named Jason Lester, who unfortunately is not putting races on here anymore. But he put it on and it was a 100-miler. He had a 200-miler, but I don't think anybody did it, and a 300-miler. But it went from Kona to Volcano was the route that I ran. And then the 300-miler continued on around the island.
Yeah, I know Jason. I've known him from Ultraman and stuff.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's funny. I think he's a strong personality. So
yeah, that's a good description, I think.
But I think ultra running in general attracts strong personalities. So.
Yeah, think. Actually, you know, it's funny. It does seem like people are either very strong personalities and outspoken, for lack of a better term, or strong personalities but very, very, very quiet.
Yes.
You know, I'm not to name names. Billy's gone, right?
He's outside right now. Part of his quiet personality.
So you've had to cancel, let's see, one race or two races? I can't remember.
So right now we've delayed one race. We're not canceling. We do have a really good relationship right now with DLNR. So they have agreed that our permit progress will just be an alteration of a date. Everything's still approved. But at this point it was a bigger turnout for the race, you know, and it involves more working parts because we have police officers, we have DLNR, doe care officers, we have a lot more community that's going to have to be at the way that race was set up, involvement. So it wouldn't be safe for us to risk, you know, to attempt to put that on right now. So.
And this was the 50-miler, 50K up on what here in Hawaii we call R1. The road that kind of goes around Mauna Kea.
Yes. And so we've delayed that. And at this point, we don't have a date because we're just kind of playing the wait and see game. Another big thing for me is trying to make sure that when fall does come around, hopefully everyone's healthy and races are being put on. But I don't want to, our race is the same weekend as 3 other races. So I kind of want to see what's going on and, you know, if it means delaying it until the winter, or, you know, delaying it until early spring. I would rather do that than stack it when people have 6 other races in 2 weeks. And, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem that I see for a lot of races, whether they're triathlons or marathons. I can't see how they're going to manage their schedules. I mean, here on the Big Island, we have a hard enough time finding an open weekend to do anything.
Right. You know, you can't please everybody. And I've already learned that, you know, in our very short experience of being a race director. I've done a few races, like 5Ks. This is years and years ago. I'd put on like hash runs, essentially. Those people are much easier to please. But, you know, I've already kind of made my peace with the fact.
There's beer involved with a hash run.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I should offer beer. But we do have a wine run. So maybe people will be easy there.
Oh,
But
that's
no,
right. I signed up for.
you can't please everybody, and so I've learned that quickly because we already had one date change and then a delay with the COVID issue. So you know, people are going to get upset, and that's part of the game. It's part of the progress.
Yeah, welcome to the Big Island bureaucracy too, having to go through that. I'm a race director here too, so I know that it's sometimes the old saying here was that it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes, and I've been lucky to do some volunteer work and to make some friends with some state workers that have attempted to help me get to know people quicker. But it's definitely a good old boys kind of community a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's also important to develop those community relations because here on the Big Island, we've had companies from the mainland come here, throw a race on, and in my opinion, again, just my opinion, they really don't care about us here. They don't care about the island.
Right, and I think that's rude, and I know that's happened to race directors here that they put a race on, and then all of a sudden there's another race on top of theirs, or the race is maybe put on somewhere that's culturally sensitive, which obviously doing a race on Mauna Kea, we're being cautious with that, and approaching that as respectfully as we can. But it's definitely, I could see that there's a bit of community, I don't want to say resentment, but apprehension towards race directors coming in and putting things on. And so it's been nice that everyone's been welcoming and working with us, but I definitely don't take that for granted.
Oh yeah, aloha is a two-way street. So nutrition. Now let's get back to nutrition because you are highly qualified in nutrition. If you were
I did have cake frosting for breakfast. But it's Billy's birthday, so we can blame it on him.
well, hopefully my nutrition involves Fireball. So
Yes.
hopefully there will be Fireball entering into today sometime or another, maybe.
There you go. No, so that was what my education was in. I personally, this is more of a personal choice than a education-based choice, but I personally don't eat meat. As far as eggs, I've become flexible on those, but I've gone, times in my life where I was completely vegan and times where I'll do eggs. For I think about 2 years of my adult life, I ate some chicken and fish. But for the most part, I think since I was like 4 years old, I've been vegetarian, vegan, somewhere on that spectrum.
Oh wow, yeah. For a lot of years in college, which was for me a long time ago, I was strictly rice and veggies for a lot of years.
Yeah. Was
I
it
that
based
was
or?
no fish. Yeah, really in there, just rice and veggies.
Yeah.
Which it served its purpose back then. I have to admit now that I kind of switched over to a bit of a keto diet and
Yeah.
stuff as I've gotten older and stuff, and
I
try
think
to need energy from any source that I can get. As somebody who's vegan and stuff, where does your energy come from? Where does when you're doing a race or when you're doing training?
so. About 2 years ago now, I discovered. I think this is where you and I have bonded the most. So I'll share this first. I discovered that there's a great benefit towards having a beer mid-run. One is a great mood booster. It's a appropriate source of carbohydrates. It's easily digestible, and I think that's where you and I have a little in common with our running style and not taking it too serious. But no, I have actually since living with Billy, because he's more on the I wouldn't say keto, but he's more on that spectrum of how he eats. I have upped my fats a little, and I've had really good success with that.
Oh, good.
Before, when I was completely vegan, I noticed I had to eat about every 45 minutes to every hour because I was doing pure carb sources. And now that I have upped my fat intake with coconut oil and eggs and being a little higher in nut butters, things like that, I'm eating every 3 or 4 hours. So that's been kind of fun to play with. as far as my personal thoughts on what's right for people, it's whatever you're going to stick to that you enjoy, without too many extremes. When people go, I personally don't think anybody should be on an extremely strict keto diet where they're not having carbohydrates, because you need vegetables, and you shouldn't be on any diet that's so strict that you're excluding any one thing, with some extreme. That's where people get unhealthy. They either eat way too much, they don't eat foods that are, actually foods, they're living on Doritos, or they're trying to be way too extreme.
Yeah, shout out to Pat Reagan, who does races strictly. Pat does races strictly on goo.
See, I do that. So I've done a couple hundred strictly on goo. I've done them on Carbo Pro. Those both sit really well to my stomach. I will generally, for the most part now, try to eat until about 50 miles, 60 miles in, and then I'll switch to goos or carb-based drinks. But I've also done 100 miles on beer and grapes, so I can't really speak for. I've had many things work for me. I kind of have an iron stomach, so.
Please tell me you don't drink White Claw.
I do. But I prefer Truly's. So shout out to Truly. You asked earlier if I had any sponsors. I'm working really hard for that Truly sponsor. So,
I've seen a lot of runs where you seem to train a lot with the ladies,
yes.
which is great to see the photos and stuff that you post. But I do see a lot of consumption of Truly.
Yeah, it's kind of our go-to. All of my girlfriends and I have done many polls and many attempts at tastings, and we hands down seem to prefer Truly as our brand of hard seltzer.
Oh, I didn't realize it's a seltzer.
Yeah, so it's a hard seltzer. It's very similar to White Claw, except it tastes better. So. Yeah.
So what races do you have planned, like, in the future? I mean, not races that you're going to race direct, but like, do you have any?
I don't. So like you said, I ran very briefly in high school and college. I guess high school is always brief, but I ran, for like half a season in college. So I haven't run fast in a long time, and I'm not the best at it because I've had some pretty serious knee surgeries. But I think right now, more than, running 100 miles or 150 miles or anything crazy long, I'm more intrigued by hopping into a 10K or half marathon. So
okay.
I might hop into, there's a great one here locally. If I could shout out another race director, my friend Keely puts on a half marathon, and it's in my neighborhood. So that'll be our late summer. So yeah, my friends Kelly and Keely put it on. That could be a tongue twister, but
well, hey, yeah. In fact, I reached out to. I know Keely is in the medical profession.
yes.
In fact, I messaged her a couple of days ago about what's up with her, and she was, training new nurses to help set up the Hilo Medical Center to prepare for things that might happen, in the short-term future.
She's been really busy. We've done a few runs 6 feet apart from each other.
Yeah.
Since she lives, just a few blocks from me, which is nice. So, but yeah, I might hop into her race at the late summer. That's probably the only thing I really have on my bucket list.
I had to thank her for last year. The first year that the Ohia half marathon went on was on my birthday. So I thanked her for setting up a race that's on my birthday.
That was very kind of her.
And yeah, really, it's very considerate, I thought. And again, I'm signed up for it end of July. Big shout out to her and Adam for being to do that race, and also the 100% Kona Coffee Marathon is later in the year.
Yeah, and so I might hop into one of her races this year. As far as like any big plans, I've been more interested in, more like adventure running style things. Not even so much FKT per se, but just I've done a few of those, but more just going running and having fun. If it means running 10 miles and camping somewhere, or running 50, it's just kind of more the adventures than the races right now. Has kind of been my what's bringing me joy. So
Oh, good. Well, and lately, because of the COVID situation and stuff, a lot of people have been putting on virtual races. I'm not a big virtual person. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
what
not
do you think?
either. I personally, it doesn't fire me up. I do a 5K every year in December that my friend Joyce puts on, but it's only because I love her. It has and it's her, and I want to support her race. It has nothing to do with wanting to do a virtual 5K. She also puts on an actual 5K in Northern California, but I'm not there, so I do it virtually, usually most years. But that's about the only virtual race I'll be doing. So.
I admire people who can do that. I mean, I know there was a big thing this weekend,
Yeah,
like,
it was fun to watch. It's been fun to check in and see people doing 200 miles in their living room and things like that. So,
I mean, I'm of the same opinion as you as far as the loops. I mean, the Jed Smith race that I did was a just under 5 mile loop. It was very much fun, but the people who can do, like Josh and those guys that can do track runs, holy smokes, you
yeah.
know.
The only reason I enjoy loop races is for the social aspect. So for me, if I want to run fast and be competitive, I'm more looking at a technical mountain race that is either point to point or something like Hurt or something, which I was not competitive this last time I did it. So let's not claim anything. That type of trail, or if I wanted to push myself for time, I did do well on the road 100 I did here, but that was a lot of climbing. It was not a typical road flat kind of course. So
Can you give us a short description of the course, the Hurt 100 course? You can use expletives are okay.
Let's see. I'm gonna say this as softly as I can think of to say it because I love the Hurt community. But of all of the trails in Oahu, why would you pick the ugliest fucking course? You're literally just wandering around not one part of the course is pretty. It's designed so that of all of the trails in Oahu, you end up on a section that has the most traffic of any trails. And the only thing I do like about it is the nature of the 20-mile loop is that a lot of the sections you do 6 times per loop or 4 times per loop. So there's a lot of crisscross. So me being a social runner, I like seeing where people are and saying hello to my friends, even if we're not getting to run together. And so I do like the setup of the loop itself per se, instead of like Javelina, that's a 20-mile kind of just full circular 100-mile loop where you don't see anyone unless you're passing them or they're passing you. So I like the setup of the Hurt Loop, but as far as the trails, that's literally the ugliest, most boring trails in Oahu. So, which is hard to do. Like there is a lot of trails there, and John just really nailed it out of the park with picking the ugliest ones. As far
Well,
as the
hopefully I can interview Gary Robinson. I'm gonna ask Gary, obviously the same question.
yeah, it's not, and I don't understand because everybody talks about it being so hard or so technical. I've done a lot more. I've done 100K that's harder in Korea, and there's a lot of Asian races that are much harder. So I think it's not the hardness of the course; it just beats you down because you never get to look at anything pretty. It's ugly. That's why I think Hurt's hard. It's ugly. I love the community and I like the people, but it's just not a pretty course.
Now, you talked about Korea a little bit. It sounds like I didn't realize that you've done ultras and trail races in other countries.
Yeah, so I've done some races in Japan, obviously. I lived there, in Korea, and
Is there a different atmosphere? I would guess that it would be the same because it's a trail race.
it's they're a lot bigger, I think, than people realize. And so you might be starting a trail race with 300 or 400 people. And so, when you have a turnout of 50 people to a Hawaii or mainland trail race. It's kind of a bigger race. I think Hong Kong was probably my favorite. It's probably the most dramatic landscape of anywhere I've ever run, because you're in these major cliffs and you're pretty much going up or down stairs or cliffs the entire time, but you're overlooking this massive city. And then it's these high crazy mountains on the edge of ocean, so you're looking at beautiful views the whole time. But yeah, it's different because I don't speak a lot of Japanese or very like a hello and thank you in Korean. And so I think being an American runner there is different. And then obviously you when you're kind of in your stupid, ultra running brain, you assume anyone else who is white might speak English, and you try to speak to them, and most likely they're European, and the chances of them speaking English as their first language are slim. So the social aspect of racing isn't there as much for me in Asia, but I would say the courses are prettier and harder, and usually they don't do aid stations in the same way I would say the Hawaii community does. You have water, and it might be every 10 miles. You might get Gatorade or Coke after 30 or 40 miles into a race. You might see bananas. That's about it.
Oh, okay. No M&Ms, huh?
No, I've never seen candy. And so it's just some differences. I think I bonked really hard on a 100K because I was expecting to kind of graze from aid stations, and I got to them and they said they would have vegetarian option, and I was like, oh cool, and they were like, we have beef soup or pork soup, and I went
oops,
no soup. Okay. And so I did that for a few aid stations, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna be walking now. But yeah, no, I love it. I think the hype of and again, this isn't anything against Hurt, because the hype of it being one of the hardest races is laughable. It's not. It's a hard hike, and I think for people like Gary or my friend Trevor, they're very phenomenal runners. Or like, my client Anna, she, but even Anna, when she won it this year, wasn't running. I paced her for 50 miles, and it's not a race that's runnable. So I think that's why maybe some people are surprised or shocked by it. But if you're expecting that, there's a race called The Beast in Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
If you want a race that's harder than Hurt, go to a 50K in Taiwan. So I guess that's maybe kind of why I don't think it's as hard. Like I did a race in Japan, and I didn't make the 40K cutoff because I literally was crawling for probably 6 miles.
And that's the 40K is just under 26, so that's 25 miles. Yeah.
And I was first place female. I think 3 people finished out of 200 because nobody made the time cutoffs.
Oh, wow.
And so, Asia does not, they don't, and that's a different attitude there. That's the only other thing. Time cutoffs there are so harsh that in American races, I would say only the top third would finish. And so when people go to do a lot of the Asian races, they may see 18 hours as a cutoff on 100K and think it's easy. And the winning elite men are finishing in 16 hours. So good luck if you're middle pack to average. It's tough to make cutoffs there. You have to be running at every possible moment.
Yeah, I have a friend, Carmen, who's from Germany, and she's living in Sri Lanka now. But she told me years ago about just regular road marathons, because I mean, I can stumble around the marathon, as long as the cutoff isn't too bad. She says, no, yeah, I could never do races in Germany because they have cutoffs that you have to race a race, not walk.
Yeah, it's pretty common, I think, in Japan to have 5 or 6 hours as a cutoff for a marathon. Because, road closures and things like that, before I was thinking as a race director, I thought, oh, wow, that's really strict. That's so harsh for people. But now I understand permitting and police. And if in the Japanese mindset, if you're not running to run or to achieve something, then why would you go walk it? And so it's just a different attitude towards running. I don't think it's right or wrong. But I definitely brace my American clients when they want to do an Asian race that they need to be able to run the distance they're signing up for. It's not meant for hiking, and they don't design their races that way in general. So, which
well,
I don't think it's a good or bad. It's just how they do it.
Speaking of your clients, what do you gear your coaching towards? I mean, with your clients, you don't have to be specific, but
yeah, no, that's a fair question. I'd say it's been a little bit of a flux. When I was bodybuilding, I would say 90% of my clients were bikini fitness competitors, figure competitors, men's physique competitors, things like that. And I still coach that, and I'm still involved with that community. I still talk to the president of the organization. I got my pro card in, every few months. So as far as like being politically and financially vested in that community, I'm still there, but it's not the majority of my clients anymore. I'd say the majority of my clients are runners or triathletes or people just looking to get healthier, and that itself has its own challenges, because when people make a goal that's a little more flexible, like I want to get healthier or look better, versus I want to run 100 miles on this day, or I want to run a marathon on this day, or I want to get on a bodybuilding stage on this day. It's a little harder to get a fire under people when they have I just want to feel good about myself and feel a little healthier. That's harder to coach. So I'd say my coaching business has moved more into that, the wellness and just overall health, as well as, like I said, triathlon and running in the last few years. But I still coach bodybuilding clients. It's just I try to make sure that their head's in the right space to do it healthy and to understand expectations with drug-free competitions. I won't and do not coach people that use steroids. It's, to me, too much of a liability, and I'm not educated or comfortable to work with that.
it sounds like your business and your coaching is built on health, number one, and then whatever goals that your clients have will then follow along as long as they're being healthy.
Right, and that's kind of the approach I take. And like I said, because that sport does attract a lot of the drug use, I say, hey, best wishes, but I can't coach you with that, because I don't want the liability or the emotional upset if 10 years from now that they have health issues. And so
and I think as a race director too, you mentioned liability. I think a lot of people don't realize they may get angry or unhappy with us if we have to delay a race or postpone a race, or some of the things that we do as part of the race, and they don't realize, I think, the liability that we face. And the fact that if you're a good race director, I think your number one concern is the safe part of your event.
Absolutely. I think people having a safe and enjoyable race experience is our number one priority of somebody getting to, originally our race was going to be like spring break. And so, we had a couple of people from mainland that they wanted to do the Hawaii bucket list race when they flew out for spring break, but that wasn't foreseeable to be safe. And so that, unfortunately, you can't please everybody. So.
Yeah. I mean, I was signed up for the 4-day Born to Run Ultras, Lewis, his race. And he delayed it as opposed to canceling it and doing it next year. So right now I understand, because I'm a race director too, but I'm looking at my airplane flight, which was already booked, keeping my fingers crossed that they cancel it. Then
they might be able to move it for you too. So
the problem is that Lewis, he changed it to the same week as Ironman.
Oh man.
I'm the race director for the Path Run the week before Ironman, that weekend.
Right.
So, and to be honest, some of the considerations that I have is I'm an at-risk person. I have asthma. I'm certainly in the age group that, I have to be concerned about. And
I haven't found that out, but
it's kind of like, well, I can't really, I don't know if the future is going to, if there's going to be an Ironman, to be honest, if our race is going to go on and stuff.
yeah.
What's your kind of your outlook on how things are going to go for, let's say, the next 6 months? What do you think?
As far as the COVID situation?
COVID and races. I mean, like you already mentioned that a lot of races are stacking up now in the fall.
So, there were some races that were put on that I don't think should have been put on after the COVID situation happened. And I'm not naming names. I'm not pointing out anyone. I think March 1st, when this started being an issue on our islands, things should have been shut down. And they weren't. And that's not a political jab against the governor, although I'll just say he's not my favorite, based on his response on this. But I think for race directors to be safe, they need to make sure that they can facilitate an area that follows the CDC recommendations. So what that means for me as a very new race director, that means that if I can't supply an environment where people can be 6 feet away from each other and the only people within 3 days touching the surfaces they need to touch, and that means if I'm handing someone a water bottle, that's unsafe. I would need to have gloves, and it would need to be wiped down, and it would need to be sterilized. And if I can't provide that, then I shouldn't be putting races on. So it'll be interesting because I think politically our states and our governors and our mayors are having a lot more control on the US than they are maybe in other countries. So there's been a lot of individual interpretation on medical safety. Personally, I don't think anything should be put on unless the race director can provide that. I think financially some people are going to choose to put things on that, maybe shouldn't happen. And, we don't know the long lasting effects of that. It could be very minimal and it could be very huge, but as far as my personal liability, I know I'm not going to offer anything that I don't feel I can provide in a safe manner. Just for not even so much my legal reasons, but more for, I don't want a racer to post on their Facebook and me to see 6 months later their mom died and they got a cold, or what they thought was just a cold, after coming to do our race. So it's not a chance I'm willing to take. I don't know. I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, you're a doctor. So, but I haven't seen it under a microscope. So I'd say I've officially have no opinion.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you about the races. I support the race directors. I don't necessarily support their decisions.
Right.
But yeah, in good conscience, it's more difficult, as you know, probably to
Yes.
delay a race or cancel a race than it is to put it on.
Yes.
Putting on a race, my joke has always been like race day, it's a rock rolling downhill. Just get out of the way. The race is going to happen. You've done everything beforehand that you could do, but there's nothing that you can do race day, literally, that is going to change too many things.
Right.
Future plans. Let's see. I understand. You seem to be engaged to somebody.
Yes.
So engagement involves a fiance, involves usually a date of some sort for a thing. What do they call that stuff again? A wedding, I think, is what they call it.
So we were looking at summer solstice this year, but that might be up in the air too, because we're not willing to risk our friends or family members with traveling this summer. So we're not really sure on that. So that'll be a to be continued to let you know how that goes.
To be announced in the future, hopefully.
Yes. So we're just, it's kind of a weird period of limbo, but we're not willing to make any decisions race related or wedding related or anything until we know more. So.
And your immediate plans are obviously to stay where you're at and not travel. And
yep, absolutely no traveling. We've been doing runs with just ourselves. We're not meeting with friends. like I said, I've run with Keely. We're not hugging, we're not touching, we're staying across the road from each other. So it's more of a social acknowledgement of one another versus a chit chat. But yeah, we're being very careful, not only because the majority of the people that live in our neighborhood are senior citizens and we feel like that's responsible, but people under their 20s are dying. We had a close friend's brother and his fiance ended up in the hospital, and they're in their 20s and in the acute care. So
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
to play around with. So
And so we are all fortunate. I mean, I get to drive 8.8 miles. I had to actually measure it because I was curious how far it is from where I'm at to a place that I go out and run, which is very isolated. It used to be more isolated. I joke now I'm going to start a dog walking service, just strictly on the uphills,
yeah, you can
because
do that.
there's more and more people out walking dogs and trying to stay healthy and stuff. And I know you guys in your neighborhood, you're pretty lucky because you're fairly isolated and have access to trails that are nearby where you're probably safer than running in the neighborhood, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah, we are less than a block from from an access point to the national park, but that is currently closed. So we are running road more than anything. But we've driven down to some trails that are still open, about 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
So it's a very short drive. So we're very lucky in that aspect. But other than that, we're not leaving the house, and we're just trying to do everything that is recommended to be safe.
And I've noticed that in the past, I haven't noticed that somebody that you and I both know, I never saw them post stuff about being on a bike. Now there seems to be bike riding involved.
Yeah, so I used to cycle quite a bit. I had some issues last year that I ended up cycling more than running, and I fell in love with it. And somebody that I live with might be he was already cycling when I met him, just not as much, but he's definitely been cycling 100 miles or so a week with me, which has been fun.
Wow, hey, that's great.
Yeah, it's a great cross training, and it's kind of closes the gap in the talent force for us because his running is quite a bit quicker than mine. So we aren't
Good
always.
job with that ugly boy on the bike.
Yeah, I can keep up with him on the bike. So.
And then I'm a path bike safety teacher and stuff. Thank you for wearing helmets.
Of course.
I seen so many people out now that they haven't ridden their bikes for a while, and they're out there. Their kids, the keikis, have helmets on, but they don't. And it's kind of like, no, you're setting a bad example. You need to also wear a helmet and everything. But I think that's coming around.
I was the first person on the most gory incident I've ever seen, and it was someone on a bike. So that said, I will never ride without a helmet, and the person had a helmet on, but unfortunately did not save them. And that said, I very fresh in my mind, so I'm always very careful about where I'm at and where I ride. So.
Oh yeah, and I know that I usually ride. To be honest, I ride on Queen K because it's got wide shoulders, and I always wear high vis. I can't tell you how many people. John Kelly, if you're listening, John, in his when he was a brief pro in triathlon, instead of doing the Barkley, he was on the Everyman Jack team, and their kit was black and blue, and it's like, come on, we're high vis, please.
Yeah.
I mean, especially on this island, or actually anywhere. Shoot, it's like I ride motorcycle. People think you're invisible. They look right at you and then pull out in front of you. So it's like our safety message for today is wear high vis clothes and wear a helmet.
Yes, please.
So sponsors, do you have sponsors?
I don't.
Who would you like? You've already mentioned that you would like to have Truly be a sponsor. So any other people you want to reach out?
That's the only sponsor I'm accepting. So unless they're, you know what? I take that back. There's a local winery. That's where we're putting our race on in August. Volcano Winery wants to, you know, ship wine to our house. I will accept said donations. But not open. No, that was kind of the nice part about getting out of bodybuilding. I had a lot of relationships and sponsors, and you know, you're supposed to post and have these connections, and you know, I still was very careful about working with companies that I utilized, but as far as who I am on social media, I kind of like to keep it similar to who I am in real life. So, you know, I have good relationships, I would say, with the people at Amp Human, which I like.
Oh yeah, I use that. In fact, thank you for the coupon code and stuff that you have.
Of course. So I have good relationships with them. I have good relationships with Nathan. But as far as like having a contracted sponsor, that's something I decided wasn't for me a few years ago. It's just not, it wasn't worth my interest point. So.
Well, that's great. As a daily nutrition, if you what do you use as far as gels or sport drink or?
I don't use gels or sports drinks unless I'm doing a very long event. So I will use goo. I've used them since I was 7 years old riding horses. I was very, very skinny as a kid and had a hard time getting enough food in me.
Yeah.
So that problem has since been solved. But so yeah, I'll use goo or Carbo Pro, you know, for a long race or a very long, like 40-mile run or something. But as far as like daily, I just eat real food. So.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's me honest. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's simple, affordable, and I think it's healthier. So.
PB&Js.
Yeah.
So I think if you have anything else you want to add, any message you want to add, you know, mahalo, you know, for taking the time on a significant other's birthday.
Yeah.
And can I ask how did the cake come out? Do we know yet?
So the cake took longer. I don't know if it was elevation, but the cake took longer. So the frosting was a little cracky because it wasn't as hot as I wanted it when I put it on. But I think he was pleased. It still tastes good. It's not.
Oh, you've already consumed it?
Well, we had to do a little corner taste. But you know, it's not as pretty as I would have liked. But I'm a perfectionist, so it's edible and you know tastes good.
Well, and I think that's a good attitude to have towards people too.
Yes.
As long as they're edible and they taste good, it literally doesn't matter how it looks.
That's valid.
Okay, thanks. Mahalo nui loa, Alyx. I appreciate the time that you've taken today.
Of course, have a good day. Enjoy some Fireball for me, and I hope you get outside on some trails.
Okay, let's see if I can okay, I'm gonna use this and I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna stop your video and stuff. And in fact, I'm gonna remove you only electronically here.
All right, I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thanks again to Alyx for taking the time today. It's her fiance, Billy Barnett, who probably a lot of you know as the supreme ultra runner in in many instances. If you've ever if you've ever read the book Born to Run or seen it, that is indeed Billy on the cover. He's the cover boy on it. So I will hopefully be able to hook up an interview with him too separately and stuff. But I wanted to make sure that Alyx got a complete time with her, you know, because she's quite an amazing person, has quite an amazing background. To be honest, I didn't really. We covered maybe a tenth of what we could have covered, so I think that's great that you know, I had that opportunity. And again, to promote my stuff, I want to promote, let's see, Tailwind. Thank you, Go Tailwind, for letting me be an ambassador this year, a trailblazer for Tailwind. It's great stuff. I use it all the time, even when I wasn't being sponsored or promoting them. I've had the opportunity to taste a lot of different sports drinks, and it was the one drink that really I came to like and to do the best, I think, for me. So again, shout out to Tailwind. A shout out to anybody who in the past has helped the Big Island be successful as far as races go, and to be able to experience our island. Also, as Alyx mentioned, with aloha and a sense of ohana that we have here on the Big Island. So hopefully I will be sharing more interviews with, I want to cover Big Island athletes now until I reach out to other people that I'm lucky enough to know, like on the mainland and stuff. But I want to cover Big Island athletes. Hopefully I will have, I think Jacob Fasler has agreed to get interview and stuff. So I'll probably do an interview with him coming up shortly. And if you're listening to this and you want to be on the show, please, you can send me an email at joe@joefireball.com. Fireball is not a sponsor, even though you can kind of see here we have a couple of fireballs. Let's see, right there. We have a couple empty fireballs. But you can reach out to me at joe@joefireball. And the website is hawaiiultra.com. We also have a Patreon site if you want to subscribe to our broadcast. It's at www.patreon.com// Ultra, all one word. So that's patreon.com// Ultra. And hopefully you're having a good day, you're staying safe, and everything in your neighborhood is safe, sound, and healthy. Aloha.